Dragon is in countdown. Falcon 9 is in startup. Dragon, SpaceX, go for launch.
You are looking live at Launch Complex 39A at Kennedy Space Center. In just over 20 minutes, this Falcon 9 rocket will lift off, carrying the 28th commercial resupply services mission from both NASA and SpaceX to the International Space Station. Good morning, and welcome to live coverage of the CRS-28 launch. I'm NASA's Jasmine Hopkins. Fueling of the Falcon 9 began about 15 minutes ago, and we're counting down to an instantaneous launch at 11:47 a.m. Eastern Time. This mission will deliver about 7,000 pounds of science, supplies, and equipment to the space station. And these missions help NASA and our partners continue research to better our life right here on Earth and help us as we explore deep space. Let's go now to SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, California, where Zachary Lupin is standing by to tell us more about the vehicle supporting today's mission. Zach?
Thanks, Jasmine. Hello, everyone. My name is Zachary Lupin, and I'm an avionics reliability engineer here at SpaceX. And it's great to be covering today's mission in partnership with NASA. On your screen right now is a live view of SpaceX's two-stage Falcon 9 rocket with our Dragon spacecraft at the very top. Dragon is one of the few vehicles that can deliver significant cargo to the space station and the only vehicle that can deliver cargo from it. And to date, Dragon has visited the station 37 times and transported 280,000 pounds of cargo back and forth from the orbiting laboratory. Below Dragon is our Falcon 9 vehicle, which is actually two rockets in one. The lower part, also the largest part of the rocket, is called the first stage. It has 9 Merlin 1D engines, which accelerate the vehicle through the Earth's atmosphere and into various orbits in space. At the top of the first stage is the black inner stage, and above that is the Falcon 9 second stage. Now, the two stages will separate about 2.5 minutes into flight, and then the second stage will ignite its single Merlin vacuum engine, or MVAC engine, which is the 10th engine on the rocket, to carry Dragon to its desired orbit. Now, during today's mission, you will notice a shorter nozzle attached to our second stage. We are flying a shorter nozzle when we don't need as much performance to get payloads to their final destination. Now, for those of you following along, today marks SpaceX's 38th launch this year, 4th Dragon flight in 2023, and 237th mission overall. Now, Falcon 9 and Dragon were both designed with reflight in mind, and the vehicle hardware is built to support multiple missions with minimal refurbishment. Today's Dragon is flying for its 4th time and also marks SpaceX's 20th reuse of the vehicle. And the Falcon 9 first stage is flying for its 5th time, and we plan to recover and fly both the vehicle and the spacecraft again in the future. So far, we've reflown 170 first stages, including both Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy, and we're planning to recover this booster on our drone ship, a Shortfall of Gravitas, which is currently stationed off the coast of Florida in the Atlantic Ocean. And if successful, this will mark the 198th recovery of an orbital-class rocket. Now, as the clock ticks closer to T0, let's head over to NASA's Megan Cruz at Cape Canaveral to talk about today's weather. Megan?
Thank you, Zach, and good morning, everyone. Welcome into Hangar AE at nearby Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. This is where I can monitor the launch team as they take us through today's countdown. So far, hearing a lot of good things over the nets. The vehicle is healthy, the team working no issues, the range is green, meaning our path from here to the International Space Station is clear and safe. And the weather, which has been the issue all weekend, forcing the team to stand down Saturday and Sunday attempts. Today, we are 80% go. You can see those watch items on the bottom left of your screen. Launch Weather Officer Alina Moses will be monitoring a few showers she expects to move into the area during launch. And I know some of you out there, you might be thinking it seems a little windy out here, but those winds are well below any concerns for launch. And as for the weather around the booster recovery area yesterday, high seas kept us from launching, but today, check out this live look from SpaceX's drone ship out in the Atlantic. Conditions are still a little rough out there, but better than yesterday. Hence, again, that 80% go for launch in just about 17 minutes. So right now, SpaceX is fueling Falcon 9 RP-1, or rocket-grade kerosene load, is complete. Super-chilled liquid oxygen is being loaded into the first and second stage. You see those white clouds completely normal. That's some of the liquid oxygen venting off. SpaceX vents off some of that LOX to maintain the right pressure in the tanks. And those clouds form when the liquid oxygen makes contact with Florida's humid air. Our instantaneous launch opportunity today, 11:47 and 0 seconds Eastern Time, if we want to dock with the International Space Station on Tuesday, June 6th. For more on that, let's head over to Shaniqua Vereen inside NASA's Mission Control Center.
Megan, and welcome to the International Space Station Flight Control Room. I am Shaniqua Vereen, live at the Johnson Space Center here in Houston, Texas. The team of flight controllers at Mission Control Houston today is being led by Flight Director Scott Stover. Teams here in Mission Control will really jump into action tomorrow night into early Tuesday morning as Cargo Dragon approaches the International Space Station. There are currently 7 crew members living and working aboard the station. Expedition 69 consists of NASA astronaut Frank Rubio, Dmitry Petelin of Roscosmos, Sultan Anayati from the United Arab Emirates, Woody Hoberg and Stephen Bowen of NASA, Andrei Fedyaev, and Commander Sergei Prokopyev of Roscosmos. As Cargo Dragon approaches the International Space Station in the morning hours of June 6, NASA astronauts Frank Rubio and Woody Hoberg will be monitoring the arrival from the station's cupola. Cargo Dragon will remain attached to the International Space Station, its zenith port of the Harmony module, for about 1 month, being one of 2 Dragons joining Crew Dragon Endeavour before being packed up with critical science and supplies that will splash down off the coast of Florida for that science to be analyzed back here on Earth. Everything is still a go from the Mission Control Center here in Houston, and we're looking forward to welcoming another Dragon to the International Space Station. So for now, we'll head back out to Kennedy. Jasmine?
Thank you, Shaniqua. Now we are about T-minus 14 minutes and counting from liftoff of CRS-28, so let's talk about the science. New experiments will soon arrive on the space station. Thunderstorm observation equipment could improve research on Earth's climate and weather. And astronauts will be growing a second generation of plant seeds in space to see if gene changes transfer to future generations. And those are just some of the experiments joining the hundreds of ongoing investigations already aboard the orbiting lab. This mission will also increase power supply on the station, delivering the 3rd set of roll-out solar arrays, also known as IROSAs. After being installed on upcoming spacewalks, the arrays will roll out into position, boosting power on the station by up to 30%. Now, across the country, NASA and our partners are making small steps and giant leaps in preparation for the Artemis II crewed mission around the moon. So let's take a look at our Artemis Moon Minute. All 5 major structures of the Space Launch System rocket's core stage have now been fully integrated at the Michoud Assembly Facility in Louisiana. The engine section is the most complex and intricate part of the core stage that powers the Artemis missions to the moon. RS-25 engine testing is underway at Stennis Space Center near Bay St. Louis, Mississippi. This test is part of a 12-test series that will certify the new design for crewed Artemis missions. The engine ran for its full planned 720 seconds, the longest duration to date. At Kennedy Space Center in Florida, technicians have been testing the solar array wings for the Artemis II service module. Orion will have 4 solar wings, drawing in 11 kilowatts of power from the sun. Some of the avionics for Artemis II have already been to space. Technicians finished cleaning and removing avionics on the Artemis I crew module, which will be used on the Orion capsule for Artemis II in 2024. Now we are at T-minus 12 minutes and counting from the liftoff of the 28th Commercial Resupply Services mission from both NASA and SpaceX to the International Space Station. So let's bring back Zach now to tell us more about Dragon's flight history. Zach?
Thanks, Jasmine. For those of you following along, you'll know that it's already been a very busy year and couple of weeks for Dragon vehicles at the International Space Station. CRS-28 marks SpaceX's 4th Dragon mission of 2023, following the launches of Crew 6, CRS-27, and AX-2. The Dragon spacecraft supporting today's mission will be joining Crew 6 and Dragon Endeavour, which have been on station since March. Now, in order to make room for AX-2 and CRS-28 at the Harmony Zenith port on the ISS, the 4 members of Crew 6 underwent a port relocation on May 6th. And put another way, Dragon moved parking spots to make room for the incoming Dragons. A few weeks later, on Sunday, May 21st, Dragon and the crew of AX-2 lifted off from historic Launch Complex 39A at NASA's Kennedy Space Center and arrived at station about 15.5 hours later. And this is Dragon's fastest launch to docking time for a human spaceflight mission. After 8 days of living and conducting research on the space station, Dragon Freedom undocked from the orbiting laboratory and returned the AX-2 crew back to planet Earth off the coast of Florida at 11:04 p.m. Eastern on Tuesday, May 30th. And this made room for the Dragon vehicle supporting today's mission. From the beginning, Dragon was designed to fly cargo and humans to and from space. And since Dragon's first visit to the space station in May 2012, we've come a long way. In that time, as I mentioned earlier, Dragon has visited the ISS 37 times, and 9 of those missions carried crew. In fact, the first time Dragon flew people was just about 3 years ago with SpaceX and NASA's Demo 2 mission to the space station. NASA astronauts Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley took the first flight on Dragon on May 30th, 2020, returning human spaceflight capabilities to the United States for the first time since the Space Shuttle retired in 2011. The launch of Demo 2 also marked the first time in history that a commercial company successfully took astronauts to orbit. And since then, SpaceX has launched a total of 10 human spaceflight missions to space. And to help enable greater flexibility for future Dragon missions, SpaceX is preparing our neighboring pad, Space Launch Complex 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida, to support both cargo and crew missions. As we fly more and more people to and from space, human spaceflight becomes more accessible and creates more opportunities for humanity to become a spacefaring civilization. And now I'll turn it back to Jasmine at KSC to take a look at one of the payloads flying on today's mission. Jasmine?
Thank you, Zach. One experiment on CRS-28 could be used to predict your risk for certain diseases, aging, and how our bodies heal. Earlier this week, I got the chance to speak with the brains behind Genes in Space 10. Joining us now is Christine Anwaha, a high school student from East Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Welcome, Christine.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, happy to have you here. So can you tell us a little bit about how you're feeling a high school student with your experiment heading to the International Space Station?
It's honestly a dream come true. This idea started off originally in my head, and now it's going to be a reality pretty soon, so I'm really excited.
Of course, we love that excitement, Christine, and we cannot wait to see your dreams realized. Can you break down what is the Genes in Space 10 experiment?
The experiment involved telomeres, and these are the repetitive sequences that cap the ends of our chromosomes. On Earth, telomeres normally shorten as we age, but for astronauts in space, they actually appear to get longer. And so with that, I developed an experiment to see if that process could be linked to the activity of stem cells. Now, in the development of that experiment, something really important was measuring telomere length. But it turns out that isn't something that can really be done on the ISS. Instead, experiments involving DNA length measurement need to be sent down to Earth, and that costs time and resources. So with that, the Genes in Space team and I got thinking, what if we developed an experiment that could help address that? And so we developed an experiment that will allow astronauts on the ISS to detect the 4-fold difference in DNA length. And so with that, it opens the door up for more kinds of research to be done on the ISS, such as into genetic monitoring, because being in space makes you more prone to genetic mutations. So that's something that can help with that. Also opens the door up for more research into telomeres to be done, and even broader.
Christine, that is so exciting. And your experiment was chosen out of over 600 applications. So what advice do you have for students who are also interested in this opportunity?
Yeah, I would just encourage other students to just explore their passions in space biology and pursue it as best as you can. That's what I did, and it led me to where I am here.
Exactly. Very excited to have you here. And tell me, what are your plans after high school? I mean, you've got some great things on the horizon, right?
Yeah, so in the fall, I'll be headed off to UNC Chapel Hill. I'm planning on studying either biology or biochemistry, and I'm really excited to get more involved with biological research in the future, especially space biology.
Of course. Thank you so much for joining us today, Christine.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks again to Christine for speaking with us. And she is not the only student experiment going up on CRS-28. STEM engagement is very important to us here at NASA for the future of the Artemis generation. All right, now we are just about 7 minutes and counting until liftoff of CRS-28. So let's bring back Megan here on Florida's Space Coast and Zach live at SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, California, to walk us through the final moments of the countdown. Take it away.
Thanks, Jasmine. It's T-minus 6 minutes and 50 seconds, and the SpaceX team is currently working no significant issues, and the vehicle is healthy. Weather is currently 80% go, and the range is ready to support today's mission. At this point, Rocket Propellant 1, or RP-1 fuel, is completely loaded on the second stage and nearly complete on the first stage. Liquid oxygen, or LOX, loading is currently underway on both stages and will complete at the T-minus 2 minutes mark to launch. We're also loading helium gas into both stages. Falcon 9 uses helium as a pressurant to backfill the propellant tanks as LOX and RP-1 are consumed by the Merlin engines during ascent. Helium load began before the broadcast went live and will continue to top off until about a minute and a half before launch.
And about 40 seconds ago, SpaceX performed the engine chill. That's when the team flowed a small amount of the super chilled liquid oxygen into the Merlin engine's turbopumps. They're basically prepping the propulsion system for the full flow of liquid oxygen. By doing this, they avoid a thermal shock to the system, ensuring engine startup
Stage 1
goes
fuel
well.
load is complete.
And you heard that call out for Stage 1 fuel load complete. Now, Dragon also began its startup sequence at T-minus 35 minutes when it coordinated timing with Falcon 9. The spacecraft is currently undergoing vehicle health checks. It will enter terminal count at T-minus 5 minutes, with the next big step just a minute before liftoff, when Dragon will transition to internal power.
Now, you may have noticed those white clouds around the vehicle. Those are completely normal. They are chilled gas above the LOX tank with liquid surface that we vent overboard to maintain pressure in the tank as needed. And when that gas comes out into contact with the warm, humid Florida air, the air condenses into clouds and water. Now,
RTI, Bob.
for now, we should see the
Falcon 9 tanks are pressurizing for strong back
the
retract.
transporter erector.
Dragon is internal
The
count and
transporter erector,
internal
or
power.
The transporter erector, or TE, is used for vehicle rollout and to route propellants and electrical power to the vehicle in preparation for launch. And once those clamp arms have fully opened, the TE will then retract away from the rocket in preparation for liftoff.
We have a hot mic on the countdown net. All parties check your key panels.
Strong back lower has started.
We should see those clamp arms opening in about 15 seconds from now. Now, those clamp arms are located just below the trunk of the vehicle, which is beneath the Dragon spacecraft. And there you can see those clamp arms beginning to open around the booster. Now, in these last few minutes before T0, Falcon 9 is performing final health checks on its primary communications, avionics, and propulsion systems in preparation for flight. And we may hear callouts that engines are sufficiently chilled as we get a little closer to liftoff. Clamp arms should be fully open, and the transporter erector, that strong back, is going to recline away from the rocket. Now, you may have noticed in some of these shots, the Falcon 9 booster supporting today's mission is covered in quite a bit of soot, and that is because it previously supported NASA Crew 5, GPS-3, Space Vehicle 6, Inmarsat 6F2, and 1 Starlink mission. And you can see that strong back slowly reclining away from the vehicle.
Stage 1 LOX load is complete.
This launch will bring about 7,000 pounds of hardware, crew supplies, and science to the space station. One research project will study the effects of space on human DNA. Another will study the effects on plant DNA. Findings from both could help us advance things here on Earth, but also prepare us for future, farther missions into space. And Dragon will be docked to the space station for about a month before returning home. Now, checkouts of the second stage thrust vector control actuators are now underway. This is often referred to as an engine wiggle test. This is when SpaceX moves the thrust nozzles slightly to make sure the guidance hardware is ready for flight. SpaceX will do the exact same test on the first stage engines, but that happens just seconds before ignition.
Now, Dragon is also performing its final health checks to make sure all of the vehicle's primary systems are ready
Stage
for its
2 lock
rendezvous
load is
with the
complete.
International Space Station.
Dragon is
And there's that call out that Stage 2 lock. Call out that Stage 2 LOX loading is complete. That wraps up propellant loading for both stages of the Falcon 9. And as I mentioned earlier, you may have seen those white clouds around the vehicle.
Ground gas
Those
closeout.
clouds you see are the chilled gas above the LOX tank liquid surface that we vent overboard. And when that gas comes out in contact with the warm Florida air, the air condenses into clouds and water.
Now, Dragon is about to transition into internal power. Also, Falcon 9 computers will then enter. Computers take control of the countdown, guiding the rocket through the last seconds before liftoff. You should hear a call out about startup shortly.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
Dragon is in countdown.
Both stages are now pressurizing for launch. At T-minus 45 seconds, we'll hear the SpaceX launch director verify go for launch.
Go for launch.
There you go. And at launch, the International Space Station will be flying 260 miles over the North Atlantic, south of St. John's, Newfoundland.
T-minus 30 seconds. Seconds. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition, engines full power, and liftoff of CRS-28. Go Falcon, go Dragon.
Liftoff of about 7,000 pounds of science and cargo, including a new pair of solar arrays to boost power on the space station.
Plus 40 seconds, Falcon 9 has successfully lifted off from historic Launch Complex 39A in Florida. And we're now coming up on max Q in about 20 seconds from now. And this is the point of maximum aerodynamic pressure that the vehicle will go through during its flight.
Falcon 9 is supersonic.
And there's that call out that Falcon 9 is supersonic, traveling faster than the speed of sound.
Max Q.
And there you heard the call out for max Q. Coming up next are 3 events back to back, the first of which is main engine cutoff, or MECO, and this is when all 9 Merlin 1D engines on the first stage shut down. After those 9 engines shut down, the first and second stages will separate, and this is also called out over the nets as stage separation. From there, the second stage will ignite its Merlin vacuum engine to boost Dragon to low Earth orbit during SES, or second engine start one. And this whole sequence takes about 15 seconds. Should be expecting that call out for main engine cutoff in about 40 seconds from now. Some amazing views of our Falcon 9 vehicle as it takes our Dragon spacecraft to orbit. And in just about 10 seconds, we should see that main engine cut off.
MECO.
Stage separation.
INVAC ignition.
And there you heard those callouts and probably saw on your screen, main engine cutoff, followed by stage separation, and then second engine start 1. As I mentioned earlier, we're flying an MVAC nozzle, a shortened MVAC nozzle on our second stage. If you're just tuning in, you're watching a live webcast for the 28th commercial resupply mission to the International Space Station for NASA. This is SpaceX's 38th mission for 2023 and the 4th Dragon flight to the International Space Station this year. We lifted off from Kennedy Space Center's historic Launch Complex 39A just about 3.5 minutes ago. Now on your screen, on the left side, you can see our Falcon 9 first stage, which is going to descend back towards Earth, and the second stage on the right side. Now, as a reminder, today's mission marks the 5th flight for this Falcon 9 booster. Falcon 9 booster, which previously supported the Crew 5, GPS-3 Space Vehicle 6, Inmarsat 6F2, and 1 Starlink mission. In order to make its way back to our drone ship, a shortfall of gravitas, the Falcon 9 first stage has 2 more burns to execute. The first is the entry burn, where 3 of the Merlin engines will reignite. This helps slow the stage down as it re-enters the upper part of the Earth's atmosphere. The entry burn is followed by the landing burn, and this is a single engine burn that brings the vehicle speed down rapidly in order to land on the drone ship. Now, occasionally, with the Falcon 9 first stage on the left side of your screen, you may see some small white puffs, and those are nitrogen gas bursts that are used for attitude control. You can also see there on your screen a pair of the hypersonic grid fins. Falcon 9 is equipped with 4 of these grid fins, which are comprised of titanium, and they are positioned near the top of the first stage. Once in the atmosphere, stage 1 is only using the grid fins for steering as it makes its return to Earth. And these grid fins orient the rocket during re-entry and guide the rocket during its descent. Now, the Falcon 9 first stage has 9 Merlin 1D engines, and each engine generates about 192,000 pounds of thrust. On the second stage is the MVAC engine, which has a slightly wider nozzle, and the vacuum engine generates about 203,000 pounds of thrust. Next major milestone is going to be the first stage entry burn, which will take place just over a minute from now. There you can see an amazing view of our Stage 2 with its shortened MVAC nozzle. The Falcon 9 first stage, which is not currently on your screen, has reached apogee and is now beginning its descent back towards Earth. The second stage is continuing to take our Dragon spacecraft to orbit. And we should see that first stage entry burn begin in about 15 seconds from now on the left side of your screen.
Stage 1, FTS has safed.
Stage 1 entry burn.
The second stage on the right side of your screen. And there's that call out for Stage 1 entry burn startup on the left side of your screen. The second stage is continuing to take our Dragon spacecraft to orbit. Now again, the entry burn is the first of 2 burns that the Falcon 9 booster performs before landing on our drone ship.
Stage 1 entry burn shutdown.
And there's that confirmation of Stage 1 entry burn shutdown. As we get closer to first stage landing, it's good to note that the Falcon 9 first stage is equipped with 4 landing legs made of state-of-the-art carbon fiber with aluminum honeycomb. These landing legs are placed symmetrically around the base of the rocket and deployed just prior to landing. And if successful, this landing will mark the 198th time that we've recovered a first stage booster, including both Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy missions. We are about 25 seconds away from that landing burn beginning.
Stage 1 transonic.
Now, as the rocket descends through the Earth's atmosphere, this really puts deceleration into perspective. In the span of less than a minute, we'll have reduced from twice the speed of a jet all the way down to 0 as the rocket lands. And as Falcon lands, we may also hear a call out that the second engine will shut off around the same time.
Stage 1 landing burn. Landing link deploy. Stage 1 landing confirmed.
And there you have it. The Falcon 9 first stage that supported today's mission has landed for its 5th time, having previously supported Crew 5, GPS 3, Space Vehicle 6, Inmarsat 6F2, and a Starlink mission. Today's landing also marks the 198th successful landing for an orbital-class rocket. You may have also heard confirmation of good orbit.
Acquisition of signal, Newfoundland.
At T plus 9 minutes and 30 seconds into the mission, we are coming up on the last major task for Stage 2, commanding separation of Dragon a couple minutes from now. And we expect to have video of Dragon separation from the top of the second stage, which looks into the trunk. CRS-28 will be joining the Crew 6 vehicle, currently on orbit, so we'll be back to having 2 Dragon spacecraft. 2 Dragon spacecraft docked at the International Space Station. As for cargo, today we will be delivering more than 7,000 pounds of science, research, crew supplies, and vehicle hardware to the orbital laboratory and its crew. To date, SpaceX has sent and brought back over 280,000 pounds of crew and cargo to and from the space station. And we should be seeing Dragon separation about a minute and a half from now. As a reminder, this is the 4th flight for this Dragon capsule, having previously supported CRS-21, CRS-23, and CRS-25 to the space station. Today's flight also marks the 20th reuse of a Dragon vehicle overall. Now, Dragon has 16 Draco thrusters on board, each with the capability to deliver 90 pounds of force. There are 4 pairs of 3 thrusters spaced evenly around the capsule, as well as 4 forward bulkhead thrusters underneath the nose cone. Now, notably, today's Dragon does not have super Draco thrusters, seats, or life support systems, as it's not carrying crew. And this saves on weight and space, and also allows for a faster refurbishment time. While initial designs of Dragon carried solar arrays extended outward from the trunk, the cylindrical structure located directly behind the Dragon capsule, the current Dragon has these arrays fixed directly to the trunk. And you may see at some point both a light and a dark side of the trunk, and that dark side is actually those solar panels, while the light side is a radiator to help cool the spacecraft. And speaking of solar panels, you can see on your screen right now the solar panels that we will install on the International Space Station. Once the Dragon capsule reaches the ISS, it will be able to autonomously dock using its navigation sensors, centerline camera, and light detection and ranging or LiDAR equipment. And there you can see on your screen Dragon separating from the second stage. Well, that's going to do it for me here in Hawthorne. The next milestone coming up is the Dragon nose cone opening sequence, which protects the double ring and navigational sensors. And I'll toss it over to Shaniqua in Houston to talk us through it. Shaniqua?
Thanks, Zach. Everything is still going well back here in Mission Control Houston. Right after Dragon separated, it began a series of automatic checkouts, including small firings of the Draco maneuvering thrusters. The next milestone is nose cone deploy. The nose cone protects that docking hardware and rendezvous and tracking elements on top of Dragon during ascent. The nose cone deploy uncovers the 4 forward bulkhead thrusters, which Dragon will use for its major burn maneuvers. And we do have confirmation that that nose cone deploy sequence has begun. Again, major burn maneuvers will be Dragon nose cone deploy uncovers those major hardware. It will also uncover Dragon eyes, that rendezvous and tracking hardware that allows Dragon to know where it is in space and how to find the space station. Once open, the nose cone will stay in that position until the very end of its mission, closing prior to re-entry to provide some of that additional protection to the same hardware during re-entry. It does take about 5 minutes for a nose cone to open. We are looking for 12 hooks, 2 sets of 6 that will open here. And once open, we will see the nose cone deploy. Again, that sequence has begun, and we'll be waiting to hear once all 12 hooks are open. And we will see movement of the nose cone as all 12 hooks open. After nose cone deploy, Cargo Dragon will be safely on its way to the International Space Station. If you're just joining us, NASA and SpaceX's 28th commercial resupply mission launched from Pad 39A at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida at 10:47 a.m. Central Time, 11:47 a.m. Eastern Time, and is currently in orbit. We're standing by now for nose cone deploy. Dragon is filled with over 7,000 pounds of cargo and supplies, including a variety of science investigations, hardware, and fresh foods for the crew on station. Some of those fresh foods that will be delivered include apples, grapefruits, oranges, cherry tomatoes, and blueberries. Dragon will dock to the zenith or space-facing side of the Harmony module, just recently freed up by Dragon Freedom, which brought up the Axiom 2 crew. The Axiom 2 crew aboard the SpaceX Dragon Freedom spacecraft safely splashed down off the coast of Florida at 10:04 p.m. Central Time, 11:04 p.m. Eastern on May 30th, 2023. The crew's return officially concluded the second all-private astronaut mission to the International Space Station. Axiom 2 commander and retired NASA astronaut Peggy Whitson ended her 8-day mission with a new record of 675 days in space, the most of any American or woman. And while we're discussing records, NASA astronaut Frank Rubio will end his mission this fall, breaking a record of his own. Rubio will return to Earth aboard a Russian Soyuz spacecraft no earlier than September 27th, and in his stay aboard the Orbital Laboratory, having logged a total of at least 371 days in orbit. That tour of duty will beat the previous record of 355 days set by NASA astronaut Mark Vande Hei in 2022. Joining Rubio on station are 6 other crew members living and working aboard the International Space Station. Expedition 69 also includes Dmitry Patelin from Roscosmos, Sultan Anayahi from the United Arab Emirates, Woody Hoberg and Stephen Bowen of NASA, Andrei Fedyaev and Commander Sergei Prokopyev of Roscosmos. All crew members are awake, and after enjoying a midday meal, some are headed to exercise, while others are headed to do some spacewalk procedure reviews. NASA astronauts Stephen Bowen and Woody Hoberg are prepping for a June 9th spacewalk to install one of 2 new rollout solar arrays on the space station's starboard side truss structure. This cargo resupply will bring up 2 new rollout solar arrays packed inside its unpressurized trunk.
Acquisition of signal. Goonhalley.
And again, if you're just joining us, we are currently waiting on nose cone deploy of the CRS-28 cargo spacecraft. That sequence has begun just a few minutes ago, and it does take about 5 minutes for the nose cone to fully deploy. After confirmation of nose cone, that the nose cone has been deployed, we will have a special guest join me for a quick interview. He will talk a little more on what Dragon is bringing up and its benefits to the International Space Station. And back here in the International Space Station room, flight control room, while we are waiting for that nose cone to officially be fully deployed, we will have flight controllers that are monitoring the systems on the station itself ahead of Dragon's arrival Tuesday morning. Again, once the nose cone is fully deployed, we will have Cargo Dragon on its way to the International Space Station. Once Dragon does cross that approach ellipsoid, which is that mythical sphere around the space station, flight controllers here in Mission Control Houston will begin joint operations with SpaceX teams in Hawthorne, California. Again, we will have NASA astronauts Frank Rubio and Woody Hoburg, who will be monitoring the approach and arrival of Dragon with a planned docking time on Tuesday morning at 4:50 a.m. Central Time, 5:50 a.m. Eastern Time. Once Cargo Dragon is docked to the station, Rubio and Hoburg will begin hatch operations to open the hatches between the International Space Station and Cargo Dragon. And again, this is live mission operations of the CRS-28 resupply mission to the International Space Station. If you are just joining us, we are currently waiting on the nose cone deployment of the vehicle. And we currently see that nose cone currently opening. And we have confirmation of nose cone deploy. And there we have it. We have nose cone confirmation of deployment. And now joining me on the phone is manager of the International Space Station Transportation and Integration Office, Phil Dempsey. Hi, Phil.
Hey, Shaniqua.
Thanks for joining me. And as we get into it, can you outline the major activities for the crew with CRS-28? I know we talked some of what's being brought up, but can you go a little more in depth for us?
Sure. During this mission, there's quite a bit of research that has to be done. So the crew will start, unloading the Cargo Dragon. There'll be actually quite a bit of research that's done in time to complete it and return those samples to the ground at the end of this dock mission. As well as that, we're carrying up some IROSIS, external solar arrays that have to be installed with a couple of VVAs during this mission. And return those samples to the ground at the end of this dock mission. As well as that, we're carrying up some IROSIS, external solar arrays that have to be installed with a couple of VVAs during this mission.
Of course. And these resupply missions, just like you mentioned, are delivering science, hardware, and other cargo to the station. I know one key delivery on CRS-28 includes a pair of ISS rollout solar arrays. Can you discuss what the plan is for these arrays and what the importance is for station?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you know, the ISS program is extending operations to 2030. The robustness of the vehicle has been one of the key factors in our ability to do so. One thing we've seen is expected degradation of solar array performance over time. So these IROSs will enable us to get back to beginning of life power levels. With this pair on the SpaceX 28 mission, we'll have augmented 6 of our 8 power channels, further enabling the ISS program to continue full research utilization without interruption. That's why we're here in the first place.
Thank you. And as always, I know it's a busy time aboard the International Space Station with cargo vehicles coming and going and multiple planned spacewalks. How complex will the next few months be for the station program and the global partnership?
Sure. Well, as always, there's a lot going on. First we have the spacewalks to install the IROSs, which I just mentioned. Those are actually some of the most complex that our crew performs. Not long after completing those, we're looking forward to the NG-19 cargo resupply mission later this summer, bring up more critical supplies and research. And then we're not too far away from the next crew rotation missions on both the SpaceX Crew Dragon and the Soyuz spacecraft. So we're definitely looking at some complex choreography, but we've got extremely capable teams across the world making it all happen.
Thank you so much. And we, again, appreciate you for joining us today.
All right. Thank you, and have a great day. It's good to see a good launch today.
Perfect. Thanks, Phil. Join us again early Tuesday morning at 3:15 a.m. Central Time for live coverage of docking for CRS-28. Again, everything is on track on the International Space Station side, so that'll do it for us here in Mission Control Houston. Now back over to you, Kennedy. Jasmine?
Thank you, Shaniqua. Yet another beautiful launch from Florida's Space Coast. And that's going to wrap up our launch coverage of the 28th Commercial Resupply Services mission from NASA and SpaceX. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll leave you with a replay of today's launch. Until next time, go NASA, go SpaceX, and go CRS-28.
And cargo, including a new pair of solar arrays to
I am gay. I am my authentic self.
I am a queer woman.
I am a transgender woman.
I am a lesbian.
I am gay and I'm my authentic self.
I'm a parent of a transgender son and I'm very proud.
I knew I wanted to be in science ever since I was a little kid. I felt that it was really important to be my most authentic self, especially knowing that this was my dream. Queer people can dream big.
Exploration needs to be for everybody. Every person, every kid, if they can see themselves, the astronauts that we send out in space, but also in the teams that make that possible, then we're doing our job. We're doing incredibly difficult and complicated things. We want people that look at things from a different perspective, that can bring us, new ways of solving problems, and diverse and inclusive teams do that.
If someone is in the closet and they see people like me doing our jobs, being effective at our jobs, I think that is the biggest encouragement that I can give them, is to show I can be my true self and I can do my job. They accept me 100%. We're all together working on this.
Who I am is enough. And when you resonate that kind of pride within yourself and you exude the love that you have for yourself, before you know it, you've got a tribe of people who are just motivating and uplifting one another. That comes from being your authentic self. There's someone in the world struggling like you who needs to see someone like you to keep going. There's someone who needs an example, and you can be that.
I am non-binary. I am gay. I use they, them. There was one instance where I was participating in a candidate lunch, and they actually also used they, them pronouns. And it just felt really nice to see someone else in the room using those pronouns, and I made sure to introduce myself with my pronouns so that they could know, you're not the only one here. There's someone here who understands you and really just wants the best for you.
It requires some bravery, but take the leap. Just be honest, be yourself. And if you are yourself and they accept you, then you've found what you need. I've learned how to be confident myself, and I've also sort of established myself here. People know me. I get to work with smart and capable people, and our job is to explore outer space and to uncover the mysteries of the solar system as a daily matter. That's what we do each day.
I feel hopeful for the future because of the education that's out there and employee resource groups that NASA has established. I am my true self, in love with my wife, and if we can be ourselves, our mission here at NASA becomes more effective.
We're all different, and we should all accept each other for our differences, because that's what makes us special.
It's really important that we can show that visibility is safe, and that you can absolutely be a part of the team and loved and valued for who you are.
It's never too late to be yourself. It's never too late to find your happiness.
No matter what your identity is in the community, that there's going to be a place for you, and there's going to be a place for you to not only just be here, but to succeed and to thrive. I am a queer woman, and I am NASA.
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 Hey everybody, this is Beck, and I'm a maker of music. And like the great Sun Ra said, space is the place.
And I'm Farah, I work at NASA, and I use AI to explore Mars.
And I brought a few friends along who know something about artificial intelligence.
Hi, I'm John.
Hi, I'm Isabel. We are both artists working with NASA using artificial intelligence.
This is Ask NASA.
so Beck, you just released a set of new music videos using a lot of NASA imagery, and I grew up living space, and obviously those images are used by scientists. What inspires you about space, and how you came up with this idea?
Well, the title of the record came from a video game, a really primitive video game from the 80s called Asteroids. When the asteroids were going to kill you, and they were just about to collide with your spaceship, that you would hit this button and it would make you disappear and reappear somewhere else in the galaxy. And I always wondered what that button was called, and I looked it up one day, and it was called hyperspace. So I sort of, it got my mind thinking into music and song ideas. Because I think in some way, I think of music as sort of a hyperspace button. You know, it's something that we press play on a piece of music and it takes us somewhere out of our lives, out of our circumstances. But I did like the feeling of the music, that there was this sort of thread of outer space, kind of wide vista of space and time, existing in the songs.
Artificial intelligence is the ability for machines or computers to make autonomous and intelligent decisions. That can look like recognizing patterns or analyzing images or learning certain behaviors and then mimicking them.
I mean, right away when we heard hyperspace, we thought we have to use AI for this. Beck was already creating a sonic environment that went to like the edges of our understanding and the way that we see. And that's something that we're most excited about working with AI with, that it expands our modes of thinking. And then just the title, hyperspace, literally means to go beyond 3 dimensions. The one that we use for this particular project, it literally works in a 512 dimensional space. The process begins with the AI training on the images. So if we showed it just a few hundred, it wouldn't know that much. But what was so great about working with NASA's decades deep,
So when we first went to Mars, or when we sent Cassini to Saturn, we had some thoughts about what we might find based on that imagery, and that's what allows us to really focus down on the type of science we're going to do.
I worked a lot on the database creation, and I feel almost like I could draw a picture of the galaxy now just from going, like anyone can do, just by working with the NASA websites and going through the archives. Like the AI was then able to take that and recognize colors that were happening a lot, recognize shapes that were happening a lot. I remember when it first showed us what it thought Saturn looked like, I was blown away.
Yeah, and even then, seeing these images and getting all the info, it is overwhelming, isn't it? I mean, we're talking about other worlds, we're talking about other realities we probably won't ever get to experience in our lifetimes. This is the closest we'll come to touching the unknown. This project is so interesting because it really came out of the theme of the record. I would have loved the idea of taking sounds from these missions in space and putting them into the music itself.
The coolest thing that we have coming up, which we can point you to when it comes out, is that Perseverance actually has 2 microphones on board. It's the first time we'll have real audio from Mars. So we'll have audio as we're landing on the planet, so that during entry, descent, and landing. And then we'll have audio when we're driving, or the rover has a laser, and so you'll be able to actually hear that laser zap on another planet, which is kind of something that's kind of hard to even wrap your mind around.
And that hasn't been recorded before?
No, not with a microphone, not this way. We've never had a microphone on the rover like that.
Okay, well, send those audio files my way when you get them.
Absolutely. So on Perseverance, we actually have an extra computer, and so that extra computer allows us to make the rover smarter, and we actually self-drive on Mars. So the rover has to take imagery of the area in front of it, literally build its own map. It can then identify different types of obstacles and slopes, and based on that and its knowledge of where it's able to drive, it decides on the path.
The Mars database was in one of the easiest ones because it's where we have the most high resolution imagery. It's been so well captured from so many different points of view.
We've seen the soil on a terrestrial level, and then we also have imaging of Mars from above, and looking through this data set of massive data set of incredible images. Once we trained the AI on that, it was able to kind of produce such vivid, strange imagery, because Mars itself, I think, is so much more complex and so much more deep and varied than we imagine it is.
Okay, so one more cool feature about the Perseverance rover is that it can also act as a scientist. The rover can look at the environment around it, look at all the rocks, and say, hey, this rock over there looks really cool. Let me image it, use my laser to zap it, and figure out what's under that surface, send all of that data back to the scientists. So it allows us to essentially have scientists on Mars making decisions without having humans in the loop here on the ground.
I think, to me, the idea of space is a bit overwhelming and awe-inspiring. Just the idea of listening to a piece of music and we go somewhere else, our lives change. You know, it's a mirror to this other idea of space and space exploration, and letting the imagery of these other worlds, these unknown places with this music, I think has been really satisfying to me. It's you know, I feel really fortunate to have you all open your doors to me and my music, and for us to go somewhere with it that was unexpected, even for me.
Let's use make his face or something.
Here, let me get my video up.
Sorry, guys.
We'll get it. We'll get there.
We'll get there.
NASA. This is Ask NASA. I mean, that would be the show tune way. There's all kinds of guitars. This guitar is actually from 1901, and it has these ivory pegs. All right, so these are some vintage keyboards. And this is the 808, which is responsible for the sound of all trap music. This is the Moog. And this is responsible for most of the music of the 80s. There's a couple of pedals that I use. Little bits and bobs.
And as we leave the moon, we leave as we came, and God willing, as we shall return.
You probably dreamed of this.
Liftoff on Apollo 11.
You probably replayed this moment 1,000 times. You probably imagined the awe-inspiring, indescribable rush of the ride. You probably celebrated the miraculous, cheered the momentous, and mourned the shocking. You probably still dream of what could be. We did. We do. And while many thought we were through, no. We've been learning, we've been building, we've been training. And now, it's time. Because the next frontier is not just for the next generation. It's for this generation. It's for me, and it's for you. For everything we still dream about. We go as Artemis.
NASA celebrates LGBTQ+ Pride Month.
The laser, a useful tool in industry, science, and medicine.
When it comes down to it, a laser is just a light with extreme focus. It's both elegantly simple and extremely complicated. And it changed the way we literally see the dimensions of our Earth, our moon, the planets, asteroids, and beyond. But it was a long road to get there. Back in the 1980s at NASA, using lasers to measure physical features from space was too experimental, too risky. Fortunately, it was also a time of change and risk-taking at Goddard Space Flight Center.
In the 1960s, there was probably not much question that when a science or applications mission came up, for the most part, it went to Goddard. And we've got to do a better job of selling ourselves and being sure that we're responsive to what headquarters is looking for in terms of the competition between ourselves and other NASA centers.
I came here as hired by the center director, Noel Hinners, in '85, and he said, so what do you want to do? I said, I want to map the topography of Mars, at this scale, not the scale of buildings. How do we do that? And he goes, well, we got folks, they do stuff. And so I met a few of them very quickly, and that was Jim Abshire, John Degnan, Jack Buffton.
We started working with laser remote sensing instrumentation. It was the same type of instrumentation that communicated from ground to satellites in satellite laser ranging. We could do a little airborne laser remote sensing, and Garvin and I sort of found each other through that. I said, come on down to Wallops and we'll fly this. And he said, oh, topography, Earth, yes, I want to measure it.
We literally took a T-39 training aircraft that was put together by the Wallops team, really impressively, and bolted in a big telescope with a laser and went flying out in northern Arizona, where I had done some field work. So out there we have Meteor Crater, we have volcanoes, and we have the Grand Canyon, and the Painted Desert. So we figured in one place we could study all this.
And it was on the strength of that Jim Garvin became interested, and it put him in a position to, when Dave Smith found that his radar altimeter was canceled because it was $30 million instead of 10.
They kept talking to me about, look, we're really close to getting a laser altimeter working. And I've been in lasers actually for 20 odd years before that, if you know what I mean, but laser ranging from the ground to spacecraft. So I was very familiar with the lasers, and I wasn't averse to it, on the contrary. But NASA offered me the situation that said, look, we've got a certain amount of money for you. We're willing to spend $10 million on this instrument. But there has to be some sort of competition. You need to choose which instrument you would like to fly to measure the altimetry.
And there were 4 candidates. 3 of them are radar, and 1 the laser that we call MOLA. There was no one in their right mind that would bid a laser altimeter. Seriously. And I was all gung-ho. I was a young guy, no gray hair. There was a lot of reticence. There was so little trust that this could be done. NASA has made a monumental achievement in both radar and visible near-infrared imaging of the surfaces of Earth and other planets. But those are flat field views. And the missing dimension, the hidden dimension, which drives where energy goes, where the water flows, stability of landscapes, is the third dimension. We take for granted the map. Sometimes you need the map to do what's beyond the map.
Making those maps with that crucial third dimension is what laser altimetry, or LiDAR, is best at. And over the decades, Goddard's gotten pretty good at explaining just how laser altimetry works.
This is a laser altimeter, and what it does is it sends a short pulse of light
from a moving platform that's observing a surface, an airplane, a satellite.
Gets a reflection straight back off the surface.
We record that reflection and the time very precisely.
Of the pulse from the spacecraft down to the surface and back again.
Which allows us to measure the range to the surface.
When that's done repeatedly in orbit, you can build up a map.
The fast rate of light pulses and the small footprint allow LiDAR to measure with a much finer scale than traditional radars.
They had a big review, and the leading radar guy that had flown radars to Venus, Gordon Pettengill, at the end said, well, I don't know about you folks, the laser's better.
In time, Goddard would become a leader in LiDAR, in mapping our Earth and planets with unprecedented precision. But for now, they had to actually build the first one.
The requirements were, of course, we were in a much higher orbit. The orbit was faster than going around the moon, so we needed a larger telescope. We needed a more sensitive detector. We needed more laser energy. So in order to put our concept together, we had to gather a team. And then we had to convince their management that this was not a crazy idea and that we actually had a realistic chance of making this happen.
We worked a lot of hours. I can remember Jim talking about, working 10-hour days, and I was doing about the same. But, it really didn't matter because it was so exciting to be working on something that was going to actually map Mars.
I was fresh out of getting my master's degree in computer engineering. I was young. I had to really dive in deep. I had to spend about 2 years working with the team on algorithms. How are we going to find the surface of Mars? How we're going to track it? How we're going to compute all the precise ranges?
And we were sort of making our way. We were defining the rules as we went.
We finished the instrument pretty much on time, and certainly as they said in the letter to me, look, if you don't make it on time and in budget, we will fly a brick instead. Okay, we're not going to hold this mission up. I mean, I knew about planetary missions; they have to go within certain windows. But anyway, we made it all right.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And liftoff of the Titan III rocket with the Mars Observer and America's return to the Red Planet. And the vehicle has cleared the tower.
We've got expand launch at Canberra. You are right.
Very happy crew. And Mars Observer is on its way to Mars. Trajectory is right on the money.
We've assumed that the spacecraft properly executed its orbit insertion sequence, and we presume the spacecraft is in orbit about Mars, but we have no positive confirmation of that because, as for the last 3 days, we have no communication with the spacecraft.
To say you simply don't know what happened. It could be in orbit. It could have flown past the planet.
What are the scientists doing to relieve the tension in there?
Screaming loudly, probably.
We still don't have communication with the spacecraft. However, we are very hopeful, and we're cautiously optimistic that communication
Every day,
will be
in fact,
restored.
without communications clearly lessens our probability of success.
You say, though, we give up.
We have not given up.
On 21 August 1993, a tragic event occurred. Communications with the Mars Observer spacecraft were lost during a sequence referred to as the pressurization sequence. This was a sequence in preparation for insertion to orbit about Mars.
Once again, we're always trying things because they're hard, not because they're easy. And so once in a while, we're going to have a failure because we are trying hard things.
But I had been fully anticipated that we could have problems with this instrument. This was a new ball game completely, okay? But I was not concerned about the spacecraft. It never crossed my mind that spacecraft would let us down. And so this was a blow in the sense of, wow, something I completely didn't expect.
We held out hope for a while that maybe it would come back, maybe they'd find it or recover it or something, and then eventually that settles down and you realize the mission was lost.
I was devastated. I think we all were, and it really wasn't clear at the time whether we were going to have a follow-on to actually do what that mission was supposed to do.
So that was extremely hard to take. What made it easier is the amount of time we had for grieving was actually pretty short.
NASA decided that we want to continue this and go back to Mars. And so we had to snap out of it, literally, and get back to thinking about and fighting for the next mission, which is Mars Global Surveillance. It was a difficult time, and it was the first time I think I really felt I had to get in there and argue with my colleagues, but as the PI, it was particularly for me, that we needed to get back to Mars and we needed to get back with this instrument. Knowing that they couldn't carry all 6 or 7 instruments, only 4 would go, the laser altimeter had to be one of them, okay? The engineers had a chance to kind of just not change it, but just do some things a little bit better.
That's what engineers like to do, is they fix all their first round mistakes in the second round and make new ones.
We were asked immediately, how long will it take you to rebuild another copy of MOLA? How much is it going to cost? Can you get your team back together in time? Do you have the parts? Or so there was immediately a flood of things we had to do.
Jim actually brought me in for the detector engineer who just left the Goddard at the time. So I was lucky to join the team working on the detectors. We were only given, I think it's 3 years to rebuild it. It's shorter than usual.
And everyone, all the management knew that means there's no wiggle room really in your schedule.
But the team was largely still there, and everyone is geared up to redo it since the first one didn't make it. So everyone really wanted to do it again and do it right.
While the Goddard team was building MOLA-2 for the Mars Global Surveyor mission, a small team seized a long-awaited opportunity to hitch a ride on the space shuttle with an experiment known as the Shuttle Laser Altimeter.
I think confidence comes from demonstration. Sometimes you have to do more. Sometimes you have to do less.
Working personally to build that instrument, we built it at Goddard in our lab down the hall without any fancy paperwork or flight procedures or anything. We just built it.
I was hired then to come on board working on the shuttle laser altimeter, and I was brought in specifically to work on precise positioning, precise pointing, and precise geolocation of the surface footprints.
And we tested it on the roof, shined it over to a bank building 11 kilometers away, lined it up, and it was ready for the shuttle.
It was a Hitchhiker Special that we flew with help from NASA headquarters on the Space Shuttle Endeavour.
Booster ignition and liftoff of Endeavour in pursuit of a Japanese satellite.
Throttle down as the orbiter prepares to pass through the area of maximum dynamic.
They turned it on for us, and the first time they turned it on, the shuttle's upside down with the laser pointing at Earth. We're over the middle Pacific.
First light showed all this fuzz over the surface of the Earth. We're all looking. We thought we got something wrong. We realized later we were seeing the boundary layer clouds over the ocean. When we came over land, the fuzz was the height of the trees.
All of a sudden, the laser pulses got shorter and shorter distances.
The first landfall of the shuttle laser altimeter in the first orbit went right over the summit of the Mauna Kea volcano in Hawaii.
Well, we're extraordinarily delighted to report that the shuttle laser altimeter experiment, it's a hitchhiker experiment on STS-72, has performed absolutely nominally. In fact, everything has worked even beyond our expectation.
And that was a genuine first light experience with MOLA technology, but on Earth.
Really had to get those data sets out there, and you had to get a couple people that really bought into it and built on it and convince others that this worked.
As the data from the shuttle laser altimeter began to convince some skeptics, the Goddard team finished the MOLA instrument again.
Our MOLA team really came through. It was just really another great experience for many of us, including me. We were able to deliver to the Mars Global Surveyor project, and it got launched.
And we have liftoff of NASA's Mars Global Surveyor as America begins its journey back to the red planet.
6 solids and burning.
And when Mars Global Surveyor started getting closer to Mars, we were going to go into this aerobraking phase. That was an opportunity that we had to go ahead and turn on the lasers and see if we could track the surface.
Somebody being carried it for you.
And Station 45 was having problems locking up to the 2K data.
What was that?
You said 1607 or 16...
Can you tell if the MOLA has been turned off?
Right.
Copy, I'll probably kill my query and restart it as soon as that query is up and running.
That must be the native event.
I'm hungry. You didn't really want those sandwiches.
Look at the laser coming back, Rob.
It says about 8
It's going to be too fast and I got too much data coming in.
get there. Yes. Look, there's a little tiny terrace. This is the first profile of a crater we've ever seen on a planet.
That is.
Rob, nice laser.
Right
We have Mars, finally. 12 years. All right, let's take a look. I don't understand.
Over a decade later, the Goddard team had proof. Planet-scale laser altimetry worked. It could map distant craters and valleys and mountains. It changed the game.
Today, we've ushered in a new era in the remote sensing of Mars.
And this particular data set that we've acquired has in fact enabled us to generate what we consider a very detailed description of the shape of the planet Mars.
This has significant implications for the flow of water early on Mars.
We believe this is one of the youngest features on the planet. We're seeing a planet that is very different from Earth. And it's telling us something about the Earth in an indirect way that says that not everything works in the way that we originally had in mind.
The kind of measurements that we're making now are allowing us to, characterize Mars on timescales of days to years now. And then the next step is to try to go back eons and try to figure out what changed on Mars.
I mean, at that time, we used to brag that Mars was mapped better than the Earth. The accuracy of MOLA was so good, and after a couple of years, the coverage was so good. It was definitely a more accurate map of a planet than any planet.
And this came out of it can't be done in the mid-'80s to a tool that we now accept as the standard.
For those of us that worked on MOLA, it was transformative. It wasn't at a destination or a place that we were as much as a place that we would become.
Following MOLA, in some ways we were in demand to consider whether we could provide a laser altimeter to another mission.
A few missions, actually. It was no longer a question of if LiDAR could work, but where else it could work. But as the opportunities to test the limits of LiDAR arose, so did the challenges ahead. The Goddard team quickly began to see the evolution of LiDAR missions, building on the successes of new frontiers mapped by MOLA.
We've measured the changes, the seasonal changes in the Mars ice caps, both the North Pole and the South Pole. We've measured the volumes, we've measured the mass that's involved in that. We now have a density. So now we know the kind of processes that are taking...
Dave Smith invited me to be on the MOLA altimetry science team. And that was because of my experience with using altimetry over land rather than ocean processes.
Zwally was an obvious choice to study the Martian ice caps for MOLA, given his decades of expertise with our own polar regions, studying the ice sheets of Greenland and Antarctica through the 1970s and 80s.
And then as we went into the 80s, NASA was sort of the beginning of the development of the Earth observations program.
So the Earth observing system, I think, will be the first effort targeted at looking at the whole Earth system as a system, rather than just the little components that make it up.
Somewhere along then, I teamed up with Jim Abshar.
Jay had been pushing for a long time for a dedicated ice altimetry mission, which turned into ISAT-1.
Designing ISAT-1 marked a major leap in what LiDAR needed to do and how challenging it would be to do it. To measure the changing ice sheets, the LiDAR had to be far more precise, cover the same tracks season to season, and it needed more power and a larger instrument, which meant much more time to build.
We built a simulator for ISAT-1 that allowed us to sort of figure out how precise it could be, how we would process the waveform data coming back, how we would track the surface.
This algorithm was much more complicated than anything I had ever worked on before.
But all this meant essentially for the ISAT mission, you needed a much more advanced version of MOLA.
In Mars, we really didn't know what was there until we got the measurements, so we were doing discovery. On Earth, we have to make quantitative measurements about what's happening.
4, 3, 2, 1. And we have ignition and liftoff of NASA's ISAT and ChipSat spacecraft looking at stars and ice.
But after, we'd worked on glass at that point more than a decade, and it already launched, and usually you think, okay, now we're going to be able to enjoy the data coming down, and what can we see in the data? But there was much more, what is this mystery we're seeing? Why is the laser energy going down? Things were not working the way we expected them to, and there were mysteries, and we weren't expecting, after MOLA in particular, to have mysteries at that point.
One of these unexpected mysteries came down to the wire. Several wires, actually.
What happened on glass was the laser diodes had gold bond wires and indium solder. If you bring these two metals together, even though they're not reactive, they do combine to form gold indide.
The gold indide ate away at the wires, leading to added thermal stress, and eventually the failure of the first laser. And the second and third lasers were degrading as well. Tough decisions were ahead.
When these missions operate, there's a lot riding on the missions. You don't want to make any mistakes. You want to optimize things as best you can.
The question was, given that we would have so much lifetime expectancy from the lasers, well, the scientific decision was that the best way to use that was to operate for periods of about a month and do that 3 times a year.
That decision paid off when ISAT showed dramatic change in land ice around Greenland. And it also proved that LiDAR could be used to measure something called sea ice freeboard, a major breakthrough in determining sea ice thickness and an essential science goal for the future of ice measuring satellites.
Even though the ISAT project required much more care and feeding, it really laid the groundwork for all the subsequent missions that Goddard has flown.
Around the same time that ISAT was developed, Goddard was tasked with designing a laser for measuring a place far from any icy poles.
Sean Solomons was the PI of Messenger, and he said, you know, I've been asked to PI a mission to Mercury. I really want a laser altimeter on board. Can you make one that will work there? So the short answer seemed to be, yeah, I don't see why not, but there'll be extreme thermal circumstances that we'd have to worry about.
That was a really tough one because you fly in close to the 800-degree planet and then you have a 12-hour orbit.
The temperature changes by tens of degrees in a few minutes.
It had to always shield itself from the sun constantly, which meant that in orbit it was often at a very high angle. It was a challenge to try to continually figure out where the surface of Mercury was.
And then they wanted to be small, much smaller than MOLA. I think it's ended up to a quarter or a fifth of the size.
But I remember the manager who was running it for us at the time kind of said, you realize I've thinned every wire in this electronic package so thin that you better not look at it twice because it might break. But that's the level we had to go to get within the 7 kilograms, okay? And MLA was the laser altimeter that we proposed, and this was really pushed the limits of what we could reasonably expect to do.
Despite the extreme environmental gauntlet, the Mercury laser altimeter kept on collecting data for 4 years, right up until the very end when Messenger crashed into Mercury in 2015. But before that, it captured historic views of the planet's topography.
It is time for America to take the next steps. Beginning no later than 2008, we will send a series of robotic missions to the lunar surface to research and prepare for future human exploration.
And then one day, the president, I think it was George Bush, suddenly decided we're going to go back to the moon. Wow, all of a sudden, okay?
We've been thinking about putting a LiDAR around the moon for a long time, actually.
And I really wanted to have a crack at doing a good one instrument for the moon. I mean, my interest was in gravity and topography, 2 things that need to come together to measure the structure of a planet.
And then all of a sudden, we got a call from headquarters. Can you design a LiDAR around the moon to map the topography?
And so the instruments were chosen from proposals based on the ability to help select sites and determine the safety of landing in particular sites on the moon.
The LiDAR would be the Lunar Orbiter Laser Altimeter, or LOLA, and it marked another leap into laser altimetry.
We also came up with the idea of having multiple beams.
We managed to put 5 beams on the surface, and that kind of changed the observational strategy, if you know what I mean, of 5 parallel beams.
But after launch, Lola was suspiciously silent.
When Lola started, I think that was just devastating.
We didn't get any measurement at nighttime when we first turned on. It was quite a shock, and it was the first LiDAR that didn't work at the initial turn on.
The people that are heavily involved in the instrument development, you're pulled back in if there's surprises that occur.
On Lola, the blankets were all tied tightly to the beam expander and the telescope, and this germanium black kapton, which we didn't test with, was very strong.
And then we caused a misalignment.
I remember we discussed whether we wanted to check the alignment at spacecraft level, and we just decided not to do it. I think that was my fault, because we could have. We started in the worst possible orbit for that failure mechanism. And so we were out of alignment, and we had no signal at all, and that was just it was a tough couple of weeks.
Yeah, it is a lessons learned for life for me.
A couple of weeks later, we noticed a little blip at the South Pole, and so we had some hope. And it eventually just, as the orbit progressed, the signal kept getting stronger and stronger on the daylight side.
Despite a bumpy start, in time, Lola and the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter mission became revolutionary in mapping our moon.
And it's turned out to be exceptional in terms of describing the topography of the moon. As a result of Lola, I think largely, if not the others as well, the doubts about whether a laser altimeter, for example, could last, age limits, lifetime limits on the laser altimeter were dispelled.
The Cold Atom Laboratory is in many ways the coolest thing and the coldest thing we've ever done on the International Space Station. It is allowing us to investigate cold quantum gases and make breakthroughs in areas of physics that up until now have been unavailable to us.
NASA built the International Space Station to do the kind of research that we're doing in the Cold Atom Lab. This is the first time we're able to study this fifth state of matter in space.
Bose-Einstein condensation is an amazing feat of engineering in itself, but this type of physics is difficult to do in ground-based experiments. And so doing this in microgravity is going to allow us to really see what's going on. So you have something cool, how do you make it cooler? You put it in space.
Our ability to study cold atoms is really going to advance our knowledge in areas that will help us in quantum computing, quantum communications, and learn even more about gravity and how it interacts in our universe.
NASA celebrates LGBTQ+ Pride Month.
The Mars Polar Lander and Mars Climate Orbiter missions failed. We had to get back in the saddle. We had to get something landed on the surface of Mars.
I thought it was honestly like a crazy idea given the amount of time that we have. The probability of failure was unacceptable.
Engineers don't like designing when there are too many unknowns.
They fooled me into taking this job, saying that, oh, it won't be that hard. It's a reflight of Mars Pathfinder. You have all the pieces there.
We knew it would be a challenge, but I don't think we adequately assessed how difficult it would be.
I think in the back of your mind, you're always prepared for anything to happen, but this wasn't one of the places that we thought something would go wrong.
Come on, man.
You don't put a system like this on a major spacecraft like this at the last moment.
The trouble is, it's great on paper, but until you put it out there and test it, you really don't know what you have.
You know, I've told my people that in terms of my top 10 list of worries, the first 3 are schedule, schedule, and schedule, and there's nothing in 4th place.
I came to the realization that the heritage wasn't in the blueprints. The heritage was in the people.
Our next pass through this, if it doesn't come together, it's an all-go-home thing. It's an over.
6 green board.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
At the end of 1999, the Mars Polar Lander and Mars Climate Orbiter missions failed.
I don't know if you have net punched up, but the numbers reported that they think that the signal may have been due to RFI or something in the front end. We're not seeing that in any of the other spectrums, but they're continuing to look.
JPL was responsible for these missions, and that changed everything. There was a loss of confidence. What had to be done was we had to get back in the saddle. We had to get something landed on the surface of Mars. The problem was we didn't have a lot of time. We have to go back to something we know. And what we knew is we knew the Pathfinder lander. And because of that confidence, we can do it in a short time. We got to take the Pathfinder lander and stick our rover in it.
Pulse number 1, 3, 2, 1, mark.
We knew at the time we had a 3-year project to go to launch, and that's just very, very tight for a mission of this kind of complexity. And we've been fighting that challenge since the beginning. You worry about, am I got the right plan? Do I really have it figured out? Are we on track? Can we stay on track?
I'll briefly go over launch crews and EDL and just give you an idea of how the downlink process works during those phases. I'll spend a lot more time on surface, specifically the tactical downlink process. I'll also talk a little bit about a couple key additional requirements for Red Rover Goes to Mars.
You start getting into this cycle of things changing just a little bit here and just a little bit there, and all of a sudden the mass got heavier, and so other things had to change. Your design heritage, the blueprint, I use the phrase that I will never use again because no one will believe me, is build to print. I said, we will take the Mars Pathfinder lander and build to print. We will take the blueprints and we will send it to the machine shop, build these same things again, and that will be the shell that we land in. And then we just have to design this rover that fits inside. That build to print concept is the one thing that was completely wrong.
Message here is if you see something that you don't like in the MER mission system design, I'm one of the people you complain.
I came to the realization that the heritage wasn't in the blueprints. The heritage was in the people. When the people who had designed this thing before, they've gone through this design work, they've experienced all the difficulties, they know how to solve it.
And then we have a final TCM at 48 hours out.
These only weigh 40 pounds, but they feel like 100. We are building airbag systems to cushion a rover that's going to Mars. Well, we have a deadline to meet for testing, so we have to work a lot of hours and work hard and get it done on time and make it work good, too. A lot of it is sewing through these thick layers. It's very difficult. The stuff we coat it with makes it hard to go through. We've had to get special needles, special machines, and it takes a lot of strength to press it out with your fingers and sew it. I've done both. I've worked suit parts, I've worked gloves, and I've worked these. It's like peas and carrots, you know? Gloves are more delicate, more complicated mentally, smaller. This is physically challenging because it is heavy. We have a lot of questions because in the whole time you're building it, you're wondering, is this going to be right? Is it going to be okay? Is it going to work? You can't imagine the joy. We were jumping up and down when Pathfinder landed and was successful, and that's what we want to bring into this. How would you feel if you knew that something you have actually worked on and touched every day was on Mars? Our names are on Mars because we got to sign the lander panel of Pathfinder. And believe me, we'll have our initials in some of these scenes too.
Yeah, well, you know what? It's been hit a lot. I mean, seriously, no. These things lose a little of their edge.
Look, it's got the same texture down underneath where it's never been tested. This is the rock that was causing all the problems in the last test.
So we were right up to the hairy edge. We were supposed to just be checking the box. We were waiting to see if we had a working airbag system. It was pretty scary.
It's amazing. You never would have guessed that this rock would cause so much trouble.
No, it's not.
This is
sharp.
They fooled me into taking this job, saying that, oh, it won't be that hard. It's a reflight of Mars Pathfinder. You have all the pieces there. Put it together again, it'll work. And every single last darn piece on that entry, descent, landing system had to be redesigned, sometimes almost from scratch.
So we're using the replicate drop for this first drop. MER as being this heritage, this build to print. You never get to do that.
I own the overall system, responsibility, but effectively, I was more of a busybody, getting in Adam Stelzner's way rather than driving the system. I wanted to see firsthand and understand the challenges. And sometimes you can't really understand it unless you're there on site and seeing all the debates that bring out those subtle nuances of the design that you do not hear any other way. We thought we understood how the airbag system was going to behave. We knew it was marginal, and nobody was expecting it to be robust. But the initial design failed and got damaged in ways we were not expecting.
45 seconds. 4 seconds. 3 seconds. 2 seconds. 1 second. Release.
Yeah.
Today, we tested at 16 meters per second, and it worked. I would say that, on one hand, we have good reason to be excited, but on the other hand, it was expected to work at 16 meters per second. We didn't expect this one to fail.
Wow. It's like in the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to see a Blade Runner.
Yeah. Yes. I remember that scene.
Resolve.
Okay. A little slower.
Beautiful. Look at it wrinkling up. Ooh, catching. That is awesome. You can even see a piece of it. Looks like we have a clear.
The lighting's pretty hot right there. But
But if you back up a little bit, you can actually see an abrasion layer lifted off. It's just sitting there. That piece of abrasion layer is just sitting there.
What we've got here is what we're calling classic airbag damage, where the outermost layers are there as sacrificial elements to protect the bladder layer. It's a lot like a bulletproof vest. It gets torn up and you tear the outside part, the outer layers of the vest, and you protect the user on the inside. In this case, it's the airbag and the lander.
This tool's formal name is the rock abrasion tool. And in NASA, you have to have your name shortened to an acronym. So naturally, that makes us the creators of the RAT. I can't tell you how many suggestions I get almost daily for logos. It's a bit of a joke around here and in the space science community that we are building a RAT. One of the biggest issues facing us is the dust skirt. To prevent the dust from coming out, perhaps billowing up, and damaging the other instruments. However, it's a very slow-moving drill and only sends up small wisps of material into the air. We don't like the skirt. It's almost as like you're saying, okay, we want to eject the dust for digging this hole so we can look in, but we're building a cover right around the hole at the same time.
Sorry, your call did not go through.
We're losing money on this.
Honeybees, John Gitt. I'm here, Steve Condos.
Hi, guys.
Steve!
Yeah.
I heard somebody else on the line. Who else is there?
Squire said he's in another solid car, but if we yell out and we need him, he'll hear us and come back.
Okay.
That's right.
Well, you know what I recommend, though? We go through the report first, and then we usually want.
Sure.
And then we do who asks questions, what's remaining, okay?
Cool.
There was a discussion that perhaps got a little persnickety because the PI on the telecon said, no, we have to keep the skirt in place and perform yet a whole nother round of tests.
But I haven't heard anything from Honeybee saying that they were going to do that.
Well, I question why bother doing that?
We don't know what the skirt does at these different angles. We don't know what happens without the skirt at these different angles. This whole thing has been sufficiently counterintuitive to me from the get-go that I'd rather see tests that that's what's going to happen.
Now, wait a minute.
Trying to sell the idea of getting rid of the skirt is going to be a lot easier if you can show that, hey, this thing the skirt actually hurts things quite a bit. Yeah, where does the dust go? How fast what velocity does it fly off at? Which direction is it going to go, etc.? I mean, does it fly off in a sheet, a cone?
Well, that we agree we're going to test completely thoroughly. I'm just questioning continual testing with the skirt, that's all. I just didn't quite understand why that should be so extensive. We'll do it. End of discussion, okay? From their perspective, I understand, their instruments, they're worried about them, so we'll do it.
We have a skirt and want that mostly inside the skirt. If you don't have a skirt, then
I'm happy as a clam. However, engineers don't like designing when there are too many unknowns.
That's the baseline, and everything that these guys talked about is consistent with that budget. There's a list of threats that these guys have come to me with, and they've said, okay, the board structure may be late. The PMA contracted vol may increase. The flight software workforce may stretch to the right, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I've added all those threats up. They're in the category of everything we can think of that can go wrong. Although Farouz would argue that we've made that claim before and we haven't thought of everything. I submit that based on the data I gave you this week, you can't draw that conclusion.
Cut to the quick. What is the internal processes in Division 35 to make sure that these promise dates are going to be met?
We are holding the subsystems feet to the fire as much as we can.
What part of this gives you gas? Where are you concerned? The problem the presentation presents to the board, they can't make a judgment. If they were to make a judgment, they'd say you're in very, very serious trouble.
Come on, we're not done with this review yet. Okay? I mean, we understand that problem. And if you want us to compress the story into 1 hour, we can do it.
That's not going to work here.
I mean, clearly, he does not shift his need date to the delivery date just as a matter of principle every time it happens. We go through a very long process of trying to push back on the subsystems.
The procedures have got to be more self-contained. John's right. We got to clean it up.
Mechanisms, peripherals, ACS, for example.
We are hardware and software constrained big time, and so there are probably some things we can do. There's always something you can do, but a lot of it tends to be non-critical path activities.
We have to go to some
lousy
sites. We've had the whole mission been around follow the water. And that's what we've had that objective right from the start.
Right.
But if we go out into the middle of Elysium, we've lost that. We've lost the main objective, the main sort of theme of the mission. So it's an important issue.
For those of you who haven't been in this process before, and Ray knows well, you don't put a system like this on, a major spacecraft like this, at the last moment.
There's this tension that exists between the engineering team and the scientists. The engineers want success. And in order to assure success, they have to be very conservative people.
The landing system is very fragile in the presence of sustained winds. If those sustained winds go above a certain level, that the landing system, the airbags and stuff, cannot do the job. And so that's another point that says that even if you don't believe the models, you better be wary of what they're saying.
And that actually changes the site selection criteria. That's the bottom line.
That's right.
You're seeing a much greater concern over winds than even considered going in. But the way we started this was you have to certify the site as safe first.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think
the project will not recommend that we land in an unsafe site, regardless of the science objectives.
How do you define safe then?
That's what we're struggling with.
The struggle part is the uncertainty on your definition.
Right.
Exactly.
Exactly.
That's exactly right, Roger.
There will always be an engineering judgment component to it.
It's not black and white.
You could probably imagine two partially ordered sets. One from the scientific point of view, these are all great, these are in between, and these are not any good, and the same thing from engineering. Sure. And you can imagine lining those aside and then trying to decide whether or not there existed a site that was not unacceptable from either point of view. Right.
And this was done during Pathfinder, and Gentry was there in the very end.
MER is more complex because there were so many more data sets that you could throw at the problem. We have 2 orbiters that are going around Mars that we can direct to take pictures at target locations. So now it's much more involved. You're actually acquiring the information while you're in the decision-making process, while you're building the spacecraft, while you're worried about what the spacecraft